Tom Segura breaks his silence on Christina Pazsitzky divorce. A painful end to a comedy power couple, Tom Segura has finally spoken publicly about the end of his marriage to fellow comedian Christina Pazsitzky, describing the experience as horrible and an emotional roller coaster after nearly 2 decades together. The comments came during the August 12, 2026 episode of Your Mom's House *, the long-running comedy podcast Segura and Pazsitzky built together. His remarks followed Pazsitzky's emotional discussion of their separation 1 week earlier, when she confirmed that the couple was divorcing and revealed that they had spent years trying to save their marriage. The split has attracted enormous attention because Segura and Pazsitzky were more than a married couple. They were professional partners, podcast hosts, business partners, and parents whose relationship became a central part of their comedy careers. Their separation therefore represents not only the end of a marriage, but the closing of one chapter in one of comedy's most recognizable partnerships. During his appearance on Your Mom's House *, Segura acknowledged that the breakup had been extremely difficult. He characterized the experience as horrible and described the emotional process as a roller coaster. He also emphasized that the separation was not something that had suddenly happened in the weeks immediately preceding the public announcement. According to Segura, the couple had been dealing with the situation privately for many months. That distinction is important because fans initially learned about the split only after reports surfaced in July. Segura and Pazsitzky had already been navigating the end of their relationship long before the public became aware of it. For celebrities who have spent years sharing their personal lives with audiences, the difference between a private event and a public announcement can be enormous. Segura's comments suggested that the public was seeing only the final stage of a much longer and more complicated emotional process. One of the biggest questions among fans involved Pazsitzky's decision to discuss the separation without Segura beside her. When Pazsitzky spoke about the divorce on the podcast, she became emotional while explaining that the marriage had ended despite years of attempts to make it work. Some listeners criticized Segura for seemingly allowing his estranged wife to address such a serious subject by herself. Segura pushed back against that interpretation. He explained that he and Pazsitzky had already been recording separate episodes for a considerable period of time. In other words, her hosting the episode alone wasn't necessarily a decision made specifically because of the divorce. Instead, the podcast had already developed a format in which the two comedians sometimes recorded independently. Segura said he was bothered by the assumption that he had somehow forced Pazsitzky to confront their breakup publicly without him. That clarification gives fans a different perspective on what they were seeing. What appeared from the outside to be a husband avoiding an uncomfortable conversation may actually have been part of a recording arrangement that had been established well before the divorce became public. Christina Pazsitzky's emotional announcement. Pazsitzky had already addressed the breakup during an August 5 episode of Your Mom's House *. Her discussion was noticeably emotional. She confirmed that she and Segura were divorcing and described the situation as extremely sad. She also explained that they had tried for several years to resolve their problems, particularly because of the importance of their family. That point became one of the central themes of her message. Rather than portraying the divorce as a dramatic battle between two enemies, Pazsitzky described it as the painful conclusion of a relationship that had ultimately become impossible to repair. She reflected on the years they had spent together and the life they had created. The couple had been together for roughly 2 decades, married in 2008, and eventually became parents to 2 sons, Ellis and Julian. For Pazsitzky, the length and significance of that relationship appeared to be part of what made the breakup so difficult. There was a shared history that could not simply disappear because the marriage had ended. Segura and Pazsitzky's relationship was unusual because their personal and professional lives became deeply intertwined. They met through the comedy world and eventually turned their experiences as a couple into material for their careers. In 2010, they launched Your Mom's House *, a podcast that eventually became a major comedy property. The program grew alongside their individual careers and helped establish the larger YMH Studios network. Over the years, listeners became accustomed to hearing the couple discuss relationships, parenting, embarrassing situations, and everyday life. That created an unusual connection between the comedians and their audience. Fans weren't simply watching two entertainers perform. They were watching a married couple evolve. They heard jokes about their relationship. They heard stories about raising children. They witnessed career successes and personal struggles. That history helps explain why the divorce has generated such a strong reaction. For many listeners, Segura and Pazsitzky represented a long-running partnership that seemed inseparable from the podcast itself. Now they are attempting to redefine that relationship. Despite the emotional pain surrounding the divorce, both comedians have emphasized that the breakup is not an ugly public war. Pazsitzky specifically characterized their relationship as amicable and asked fans not to turn the situation into a battle between two sides. Segura similarly said that he and Pazsitzky continue communicating and are focused on moving forward. That may be particularly important because they share two children. The couple's sons are still young, meaning the two comedians will remain connected as parents regardless of what happens with their marriage. Segura has indicated that his priorities now include taking care of his children and maintaining a healthy relationship with Pazsitzky as they navigate the transition. That doesn't mean the situation is painless. Quite the opposite. But their public comments suggest they are attempting to separate the end of their marriage from their responsibilities as parents. Celebrity divorces are nothing new, but the Segura-Pazsitzky split hits differently for longtime *Your Mom's House* listeners. The podcast has existed for more than 15 years. For some fans, that means they have effectively grown up alongside the couple. Listeners heard them discuss the arrival of their children and other major life events. Pazsitzky even referenced the fact that audiences had followed them through births, deaths, accidents, illness, and the COVID era. That creates a sense of familiarity. But familiarity can also create unrealistic expectations. Fans may feel that because they have heard someone talk about their relationship for years, they understand what happens behind closed doors. The reality is that even a highly public relationship contains enormous amounts of private information. Segura's explanation that the couple had been dealing with the separation for many months is a reminder that public announcements frequently occur long after a personal decision has been made. The audience gets the headline. The people involved have already lived through the story. Perhaps the most unusual part of this situation is that the professional partnership isn't necessarily ending with the marriage. Reports indicate that Segura and Pazsitzky intend to continue working together through their podcast operation. That creates an unusual challenge. Most divorced couples don't have to sit beside each other and entertain millions of listeners. Segura and Pazsitzky do. Their professional relationship will therefore require a completely different set of boundaries from their former marriage. Can they continue making the same jokes? Will they discuss their personal lives? Will listeners constantly analyze every interaction? And will the audience eventually adjust to seeing them as former spouses rather than husband and wife? Those questions don't have easy answers. The pair have spent years turning their relationship into comedy. Now they must decide how much of that relationship belongs in their work after the marriage itself has ended. Segura's comments may have provided some clarity, but they don't eliminate the sadness surrounding the situation. The comedian made it clear that the divorce has been emotionally difficult. Pazsitzky has been equally candid about the pain. Yet both have also emphasized that their family remains important and that the two are continuing to communicate. That may ultimately become the defining story of their separation. Rather than a celebrity divorce dominated by accusations, public feuds, and social media attacks, Segura and Pazsitzky appear to be trying to navigate an extremely personal transition while protecting their children and preserving their professional relationship. Their story also demonstrates something that celebrity culture often obscures. A marriage can end without erasing everything that came before it. Nearly 2 decades together produced children, careers, businesses, friendships, memories, and an enormous body of shared work. Those things don't disappear because the romantic relationship has changed. For now, both comedians appear determined to keep working and move forward. Segura has indicated that he doesn't intend to continually discuss the divorce publicly. Instead, he wants to focus on his career, his children, and the future. Pazsitzky has similarly demonstrated that she intends to continue working while dealing with the emotional reality of the breakup. Their careers remain active on separate and overlapping fronts. Segura continues his stand-up and television work, while Pazsitzky remains active as a comedian and podcast personality. Segura's Netflix series Bad Thoughts also received 2 Emmy nominations in 2026, adding another major professional milestone during an otherwise difficult personal period. For the audience, however, the biggest question may remain the future of Your Mom's House. The podcast was built around the chemistry between 2 comedians who were also husband and wife. Now that relationship has fundamentally changed. Whether that change ultimately transforms the podcast or becomes another chapter in its long history remains to be seen. For Segura and Pazsitzky, though, the immediate challenge is much more personal. They are attempting to close a marriage that lasted nearly 20 years while continuing to raise their children, maintain professional responsibilities, and navigate a public audience that has followed them for more than a decade. The most revealing part of Segura's message may therefore be its simplicity. He isn't presenting the divorce as entertainment. He isn't portraying it as a battle. He's describing it as painful. And Pazsitzky has offered essentially the same message from her side. Their marriage didn't work despite years of trying, but the family they created remains important. For 2 comedians who built careers by turning everyday life into jokes, this may be one situation where there simply isn't a punchline. There is only the difficult process of moving forward. And for now, Tom Segura and Christina Pazsitzky appear to be doing exactly that.